Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Comprehensive D&D 5e Guides, the show that needs a better name because it's far too long. But it's where I talk about D&D 5e stuff from a design perspective and a maximizing your play perspective. First things first, I want to apologize for the slight background noise. That is my heater, because in the frozen north where I live, it's like single digit. I can actually look. It is currently currently 9 below zero. Oh no, it is zero. We don't have a temperature, but wind chill brings it down to about -11. So it's very cold here. So the heater may turn off and on randomly because that's how our heater works. Beyond that, though, yeah, the whole point of this is not really to help you min-max your characters. I may do a series on min-maxing eventually. I've done at least one video on it. But this is more of for people to understand the basic principles that the class was designed to take advantage of, and to really give you the chance to get the most out of your character by understanding how it's supposed to work. And how it was designed to work, as opposed to how it can work, or how you may want to try and break it or anything like that, or do unique things with it. So yeah, the reason I'm hopping back on this bandwagon is twofold. One, I've been meaning to do this for a little while, and two, Wizards of the Coast have announced that they are re-releasing the Artificer class. If you don't know about the Artificer class, it was something that showed up in Unearthed Arcana, and it was unbalanced and it just didn't really work. And then they released it to the DM's Guild to get feedback on it, and that was over a year ago. And they kept saying as soon as we have a good one, we will release it for real, and they'll make it Adventure League legal and stuff like that. So they're releasing this updated version. There's no comment yet about whether it'll be Adventure League legal at this point, but this should be a major update, and I'm going to want to do one of these for that. However, it's been a while, and I don't want to just jump into a brand new class that I haven't been playing and DMing for 4 or 5 years. So I'm going to start off with what I consider one of the more interesting classes, and I think one of the most creative classes I've seen D&D create. One of the things I really like about 5th edition is every single class is unique. They all play very differently. Even classes that should kind of be the same, like a wizard plays very differently from a sorcerer, despite the fact that they're both just spellcasting classes. And even things like a cleric and a druid are both spellcasting classes, but they're so massively different. So what I'm going to do today is actually do an episode on the Warlock. The Warlock is such an interesting class for a bunch of different reasons. From a lore perspective, the Warlock gives you so much role-playing ability, because the way that a Warlock gets their spells is they don't actually have any magical ability. What happens is they make a pact, an agreement with a powerful creature, and what kind of creature that is defines how your Warlock's going to play and what they do. And in exchange for something, and this is something that the player has to kind of decide on their own and work with their DM, that powerful creature will bestow magic on them and bestow gifts on them. But it's a pact. They are beholden to this creature. If the creature decides that they no longer like what the warlock is doing, they can take all that magic away. So they are, beholden, almost slaves to this creature in order for power. And it's a really unique dynamic that you don't see in any other classes. It's a dynamic I kind of put into my Dragon Knight. I like the dynamic. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. I've mentioned before, in 5th edition, within your first 2 levels, you should have the defining features of your class. And there goes the heat. Warlock does not disappoint there. The first thing that we have to mention is the fact that Warlock spellcasting works completely different from literally every other spellcasting in the game. And that's because Warlocks don't get a lot of spell slots. A normal spellcasting progression, you'd start off with... let me actually look before I just speak out of my ass. Yeah. First level, you'd start with 2 spell slots, but as soon as you hit 2nd level, you've got 3, and then 3rd level, you've got 6. You've got 4 first level, 2 second level, and it just goes up to the point where by level 20, you have a lot. I'm not going to try and add that up because I can't right now. But you just get more and more spell slots, and by the time you're roughly anywhere between like 8th and 12th level, depending on the caster, you really aren't as stingy with your spells. You have so many spells at that point and so many spell slots that in general, you can feel like that really badass magic user. They're just flinging fireballs and, conjuring, elemental storms and all, that really cool stuff. The Warlock doesn't get that. At level 20, they have 4 spell slots. That's it. Now, I will go into some stuff that they technically have more than that, but again, it's Warlock. Everything is weird and different with Warlock. So they only get 4 spell slots, and all their spell slots are always the same level. So any other caster, like if you have a level 1 spell, you can cast that spell with a level 2 slot, a level 3 slot, level 4, all the way up to 9. And there are some spells that get more powerful the higher level slot you cast them at. Warlocks only have 1 level of spell slots, but it's always their highest level. So, for example, at 1st level, they only have 1st level spell slots, and they have 2 of them. At 3rd level... or they only have 1 spell slot at 1st level. At 3rd level, they have 2 spell slots, and they are 2nd level. When you get up to 5th, they still only have 2 spell slots, but they're now 3rd level. So if they were to cast something like Armor of Agathis is a really good example of a just classic Warlock spell. Armor of Agathis gives you temporary hit points, basically 5 temporary hit points per level of the spell. So if they cast it at 1st level, they get 5 hit points. They cast that same spell using technically the same spell slots that they always have, but they cast it when they're 5th level. They will automatically cast that spell at 3rd level, giving them 15 temporary hit points instead of 5. And that's, kind of how the Warlock works, is this thing where their leveled spells are few and far in between in a single combat, but they also get all their spell slots back on a short rest. So a Warlock is very much kind of like a monk, where they really benefit from a short rest more than most other classes. And it means that even though, yeah, they have less spell slots, they can still sling their leveled spells a little bit more freely, simply because they're going to be able to get them back much faster. In a regular adventuring day, according to the DMG, I believe a regular adventuring party is expected to have like 1 or 2 short rests in an adventuring day. So that would mean for wizards, they get they can get half their spell slots back on a short rest. But warlocks get all of them, and it's every time they short rest, whereas wizards can only do that once per day. So that's one of the defining features, and it's right at level 1 that happens. And the other thing, the other defining feature that happens right at level 1 is you choose your patron. Now, I mentioned before that the patrons really kind of define what kind of warlock you're going to be. They the different patrons massively change how you play the warlock, and I'll go into the specifics of each patron in the PHB a little later, because they're displayed in the book a little later. They will that is your subclass, you know. And a Fey Pact warlock is going to be different than a Fiend Pact, which is going to be different than an otherworldly pact. Yeah, those are really big defining features that will kind of lay out how the class is going to be played. The other thing that's really important, because a warlock has such limited spell slots, they are very cantrip focused. They don't get a ton of cantrips at level 1. You only get 2 compared to a wizard who gets I think it's at least 4, if I remember correctly. And even at max level, you at 10th level you get your 4th cantrip, and that's it. You don't get cantrips after that, and you can't learn more cantrips through leveling up or anything like that. The only way you get more is through feats. Or multi-classing. So they don't get many cantrips, but the cantrips that they do get, they use like crazy, with Eldritch Blast being the really defining warlock cantrip. And I'll go into a little more description of Eldritch Blast itself and some of the other things that they get when we get to the next section. So yeah, they're very cantrip focused. They get more use out of their cantrips than any other spellcasting class. And those unique spell slots that come back on a short rest, and you only get a few of them, that really makes the warlock a very interesting kind of burst damage, combined with very tactical mindset of, okay, I have these limited spell slots. What is the most advantageous way to use them in this combat? In the next combat, what's going to do me the best? So that's that spellcasting. Oh, and they're charisma spellcasters, so that's always fun. At second level, they get the other defining feature of the class, which is Eldritch invocations. I'll actually go through all the different invocations in the PHB at the end, because that's where they are in the PHB. But what these Eldritch invocations do is they modify how spells work. Now, when you look at something like a sorcerer, they're one of their defining features is the idea that they can sculpt spells. They can kind of change them as they cast them. Warlocks are different in the idea that these Eldritch invocations permanently change spells and how they work instantly. They're not something that they choose on the fly. Again, it goes back to the very strategic, tactical mindset of a warlock. When they take an Eldritch Invocation, it's going to change how they play their character and how they use the spells that those invocations change instantly. So again, as you get more Eldritch Invocations, you can more specialize your Warlock to play exactly the way you want to. Warlock, I think, is one of the most unique classes in the idea that you really can create just about any character with it. Despite the fact that it only has a D8 hit die, you can build a Warlock to do a lot of different things. Using things like Armor of Agathis or Mage Armor and Pact Weapons and things like that, you can create a melee fighting Warlock that can fight on the front lines and do a lot of damage. You can use Eldritch Blast to be, a sniper, a quite literal spell sniper. Towards the end of this, I'll actually describe a Warlock character I created specifically to be this super cool spell sniper. He's a multi-class, but still. You can be a conjurer and just always be summoning, allies and things like that to help you. You can, be a controller where you're dominating creatures' minds and, charming and mind controlling and fearing and things like that. Like there's so many different ways you can play the Warlock that you can literally have an entire party of Warlocks, have a relatively balanced party, because there's even with Xanathar's guide, there's even Warlocks that can heal now. With all that, like, you can fill every role in your party with just Warlocks and have a great time. No one will feel like they're being overshadowed by another Warlock doing this. Like, you can just have a massive variety of them doing all these different things. So yeah, like I said, we'll get into Eldritch Invocations at the end because that's where they are in the PHB. When you get third level, you get what's called your Pact Boon. This is the final thing that will kind of solidify and help you define how you want your class to play. Like I said, in 5th edition, between your first two levels, you will get the defining features of your class, the thing that makes it unique. The Pact Boons don't really massively change the classes as much as like your Patron Choice or your Eldritch Invocations. They're just going to really help you to expand what you can do within your choice. There are 3 different packs in the PHB. I believe that might be all. I'd have to look in Xanathar's guide again. I don't think they added extra Pact Boons. So the first one is Pact of the Chain. It lets you cast the Find Familiar spell, and you can cast it as a ritual, so that means you don't have to expend any of the material components that don't have a monetary value. Anything with monetary value, which I believe Find Familiar costs 10 gold in incense. But other than that, it also doesn't count against your spells known. Again, Warlocks don't know quite as many spells as some of the other classes. They know a fair amount. By 20th level, they have 15 spells known. And they always have them prepared, so they don't have to prepare spells like a wizard would have to, or a cleric where they have to pray for their spells. So that's nice. Pact of the Chain, with certain Eldritch Invocations, Pact of the Chain Warlocks become super amazing scouts. I've had players at my table that will use, one of the other interesting things about Pact of the Chain is, instead of choosing a regular familiar, they actually can choose special forms. They can choose an imp, a pseudo-dragon, a quasit, or a sprite. And with those special forms come special abilities. The imp in particular can turn invisible. And And the Find Familiar spell lets you see through their eyes and everything, as long as they're within 100 feet. So that is a massive useful thing as a scout. And I had a player that used to use his closet all the time to scout areas. And unless they have true seeing or something like that, they generally can get in and out completely and map an entire place with just this Warlock. So normally you'd send, you know, a rogue ahead or a ranger ahead to kind of scout and be super stealthy. Doesn't matter. Send the invisible Warlock patron. Pseudo dragons. I don't have the stat blocks in front of me for the rest of these, but they're all going to have some other kind of really interesting stuff. The other thing is when you take the attack action, you can actually forego one of your attacks to have your familiar attack. And again, because of the fact that you get different, normally a familiar attack is not going to do much. It really isn't. But with these special forms, some of the familiar attacks can do some really interesting things. So again, the Pact of the Chain is really designed to be that Warlock that you know, has helpers and is very kind of tactical, strategic, because having a familiar can change things. You can have your familiar go over and use the aid action to give you or someone else advantage on an attack roll. You can have them, you know, just flying around scouting for you. It's very strategic, if I go that far. Second one is Pact of the Blade. This one is one of my favorite. Basically, you can use your action to create a pact weapon in your empty hand. You can choose the form that this melee weapon takes each time you create it. You're proficient with it while you wield it. The weapon counts as magical for the purposes of overcoming resistance and immunity to non-magical attacks and damage. So you never don't have a weapon. Always do. Always, always, always. And it just appears whenever you want it. It disappears if it's more than 5 feet away from you for more than a minute. It also disappears if you use this feature again, if you dismiss the weapon, or if you die. You can also transform a magic weapon into your pact weapon. And this is one of the things that makes the Warlock a little bit more unique. When you transform a magic weapon into your pact weapon, it doesn't have to be a melee weapon. So you can get a bow and turn it into your pact weapon, or a crossbow, or something like that. And that's one of the defining features of the Pact of the Blade, is that they really can use any weapon, because any weapon you turn into your pact weapon, you're proficient with. That's part of this thing. So you literally can use any weapon. So you want to be that guy that just picks up weapons and uses them? Pact of the Warlock. It takes an hour to turn it into your pact weapon, just like anything else. And yeah, so that's it. There are Eldritch invocations that make your pact weapon significantly more powerful, and can turn you into kind of a melee fighting or just a weapon fighting Warlock. So we'll go into those later. The final pact is the Pact of the Tome. This is a really useful one for people that really want to get that super powerful spellcaster feel. You get a grimoire called the Book of Shadows. You get to choose 3 cantrips from any class list, which that is a massively useful thing, because there's certain cantrips that are super useful and can be purposed for a Warlock from other classes. Like I'm actually, if you're going to be a melee focused Warlock, getting the what's it called? There's a druid cantrip, Thorn Whip, that you throw this Whip of Thorns and then drag them towards you. Really, really useful if you're going to be a melee guy and they're just that little bit out of reach. You know, get over here. Yeah, that's really cool. You get extra cantrips, which I mentioned. Warlocks are a cantrip focused class, so this is a major deal for you. And while the Book is on your person. You have to have that book with you. You can cast those cantrips at will. They don't count against your number of cantrips known. And if they don't appear on the Warlock spell list, they're nonetheless Warlock spells for you. So that means you can take any cantrip, like a cleric's spells require wisdom. Not if you use this, they now use charisma, just like your other Warlock spells. So really useful there. And then the rest of it is just if you lose the Book of Shadows, you can perform a ritual to get it back. Excuse me. And the book turns to ashes when you die. So again, the Pact of the Tome Warlocks are very much about, because you'll get Eldritch Invocations that'll let you add more spells to your Book of Shadows and other things like that. So that's your very much spell casting focused Warlock. That wants to be even more of a, phenomenal cosmic powers. So yeah, fourth, and again at multiple levels after that, you get your ability score improvement or feats. Again, because the Warlock is such a unique class, feats can really change how it plays and can really do things. Specifically, the Magic Initiate feat can really change things. Because you can get a first level spell from another class and get... you basically get one casting of that first level spell, so you can increase your spell slots by just having that. Now, you can only use it to cast those Magic Initiate feats or spells, but it's still another way to just get extra spells for your Warlock if you are doing that kind of super castery Warlock. And then there's other ones as well. Sentinel can be really interesting for a melee Warlock, stuff like that. And then you don't get anything else other than spells, obviously, until 11th level. You get what's called Mystic Arcanum. Mystic Arcanum are how they deal with higher level spells for Warlocks. Being able to cast spells at 8th or 9th level after a short rest would make the Warlock broken. Completely broken. So what happens is your regular Warlock spell slots don't go higher than 5th level, which is still super powerful. Half casters, that's as high as they get. So you still have pretty powerful spells, but there are 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th level Warlock spells. So the way that you cast those is through these Mystic Arcanums. What happens is you choose one 6th level spell. You can cast that spell once a day, kind of like a more traditional spell slot. You get that for a 7th level spell, an 8th level spell, and a 9th level spell. So in addition to your regular spells known and your Warlock spell slots, you get one casting of these super powerful ones. At 11th level is when you get your 6th. You get your 7th level at 13, 8th level at 15, and 9th level at 17. So it keeps in line with the level progression of other spellcasters. It's just you only get one casting per day. So that's another way that kind of changes how the Warlock works. Because once you get these super powerful spells, and you only get that, excuse me, once a day use on them, you really start upping your game. So yeah, and then at 20th level you get Eldritch Master. What that is it's kind of like the wizard ability where they get to regain spell slots on a short rest. But this one, you spend 1 minute and you regain all your packed magic spell slots. So all of those spell slots that normally take an hour for a short rest, you get in 1 minute. It's really, really useful because it effectively doubles your spell slots. As long as you have 1 minute outside of combat, you get all of them back. So again, you get even more powerful at that. And at 20th level, they're all 5th level spell slots. So you are casting super powerful spells and you have 8 of them. The only limiting factor to that is you can only do that once per long rest. But that's still a major benefit to a Warlock, especially if you're in an area where you are getting into a lot of fights. A Warlock can just own combat for a little while. So the next thing is we're actually going to talk about the patrons and how they really change how the Warlock works. Like I said, Xanathar's Guide has some more patrons. I believe the Sword Coast Adventures Guide has them too. I'm only going to focus on the ones in the PHB because I don't want this video getting too long. But it will kind of show you just how drastically things change with a Warlock. And we'll show you kind of one of the other defining features is they have a lot of just class abilities that let them do things. As opposed to other class abilities like, Ranger class abilities where they get to do, maybe a little extra damage on an attack they're already doing. Where they'll have... enemies will have disadvantage on opportunity attacks against them. That's it changes things they can already do. Warlocks get abilities that let them do new things, and so that's why your patron is such a big deal. So the first one we're going to talk about is the Archfey. They used to call these Fey Pact Warlocks in earlier editions. With the Archfey, I'm not going to do a deep dive into the spell list of the Warlock just because that is an entirely separate video. But I am going to go through what's called the expanded spell list. Each patron has extra spells that you get to use, and they define how that patron works and how you will play your class. It's why choosing your patron is such an important aspect of being a Warlock. The Archfey is made up of a lot of kind of controlling, manipulative things. Fey in general are considered to be tricksters and things like that in D&D. So the Archfey kind of exemplifies that. Their expanded spell list, they get Fairy Fire and Sleep. Sleep in 5th edition is somewhat useless. With a Warlock, with a Warlock, because they cast all their spells at whatever their highest level is, Sleep can technically be a little bit more useful for a bit, but it's based on hit points and as you get as you get higher, the hit points get to the point where it's too difficult to use Sleep effectively. However, Fairy Fire, I've mentioned, I can't remember if I've mentioned in videos, but I've mentioned in comments and conversations. Fairy Fire is one of the most useful spells, first level spells in the game. It can remove invisibility. You can't turn invisible while you have Fairy Fire on. It gives everybody advantage on attack rolls against it, and it's a one save thing. As long as they fail their first save, they have it on them for a minute. So it's a massively useful spell. And again, it kind of defines the Archfey. It's doing things that's changing the battlefield. It's helping your allies. It's hindering your enemies. It's very control oriented. So that's useful. These second level spells they get access to are Calm Emotions, and Phantasmal Fear. Calm Emotions has a place. It's again, it's one of those spells that's kind of useful. I guess I should mention the expanded spell list means that when you're choosing your Warlock spells, you can choose from these spells in addition to the Warlock spell list. It still costs one of your spell known slots in order to learn these, but again, they're relatively useful. So like I said, Calm Emotion has a use. Phantasmal Force, very useful. If I remember correctly, it does damage. I'm going to actually look up the spell really quick here. I have to always sing the alphabet when I'm looking through the spells because there's just so many of them. All right. So basically, well, what it is you create an illusion that as long as the target fails their check, they believe is absolutely real, and only they can see it. And it's so real they can actually take damage from it. This is, again, a very useful control type spell, because you can create, a demon lord that only one of them can see, and every time they try to attack it, they just miss. They can save out of it eventually, but it's a real thing, and because it can do real damage to them, they will consider it real. So you can take a really powerful enemy out of the fight as they're fighting nothing. So again, very archfey, very tricksy kind of thing. Third level, you get Blink and Plant Growth. Blink is massively useful for any type of Warlock, because what it is you have a basically 50% chance of just piecing out of combat after your turn every turn. And because, again, Warlocks are so cantrip focused, this can be massively useful. Especially if you're using a melee Warlock. That means they can run into battle, attack with their packed weapon, and then bamf out of there, so they can't get attacked back, and they turn into this really great melee damage dealer. Plant Growth is another one that can be useful. It's a control type thing. You make plants grow. Fourth, you get Dominate Beast, massively useful. And then and Greater Invisibility, another thing where you can turn yourself invisible, and the spells that you cast attacks don't turn you uninvisible. So that'll give you advantage on all your attack rolls. People won't be able to see you. Like, massively useful. And then fifth level, you get Dominate Person, which basically means you can mind control just about anything at that point. Unless they're immune to charm effects, you can mind control just about anyone with those two spells. And then Seeming. Seeming is an interesting spell that basically makes you think something is happening that isn't. And this is another one that I just want to look up really quick so I get the right thing. Seeming, there we go. Yeah, Seeming, if you watch Critical Role, Seeming is what they used for the cow episode. It basically lets you change the appearance of up to, I think it's like 6 or 7 allies. It's a great, again, it's a great kind of disguise spell, hiding spell, to keep your party out of danger. If you're, infiltrating a demon stronghold, turn all your allies into demons. Super useful. So that's their spell list. Starting at first level, and again, this is where you start seeing the very interesting things that your patron will do for you. As an action, you can cause each creature in a 10-foot cube originating from you to make a wisdom saving throw against your spell save. The creatures that fail their saving throw are either all charmed or frightened by you, your choice, until the end of your next turn. You can only use that once per short or long rest. But again, this is basically a very control-oriented. You want some extra allies? Charm up to 4 creatures nearby you. You want to just take some people out? Fear up to 4 creatures right next to you. Again, very, very useful, very control-oriented, and it can change combat. Again, I've talked about things like the monk controls the action economy. This is an action economy type thing. If you can charm them and make them just not use their attacks against you, that's changing how many actions the enemy has. Fear will do the same thing. They have to use all of their movement to, or fear just means that they can't get closer to you. So melee attackers that are feared, actually they can't get closer to you, and they have disadvantage on attack rolls as long as they can see you. Very, very useful. At 6th level, you get Misty Escape. This is another one of those kind of tricksy things. Basically, if you get hit by an attack. Or technically, anytime you take damage, you can use your reaction to turn invisible and teleport up to 60 feet to a place that you can see. Excuse me for 1 second. Much better. Basically, that means somebody hits you once, you just bamf away. And you're invisible until the start of your next turn. Massively useful, especially for those monsters that just get 3 or 4 attacks and they're just decimating you. You only hit the Warlock once, and then they're gone. And when they show up again, you're not going to like it. They're going to rain down hellfire and everything on you. Now, just like before, you can only use it once per short or long rest, so it's not like every time you attack a Warlock. But when you use it in that clutch time, you are invincible. Again, very, very useful, especially if you teleport, on top of, a pillar or something where people can't get to you, and they can't see you until the start of your next turn. So they go through and attack the rest of your allies, and you just call down, Arms of Hadar or something like that, and just completely decimate the team. So very useful. 10th level, you get Beguiling Defense. This one is one of my favorites because there are a lot of creatures, including things like vampires, succubi, that can charm creatures without using magic. And so Counterspell doesn't work on their charms, and they can be very, very effective. Unless you have an Archfey Warlock. Basically, if somebody tries to charm you, you are immune to charm. And if someone tries to charm you, you can charm them back, which is brilliant. It's one of my favorite things in the world, because it's basically like, I will control your mind. Bitch, please. It's great. They're charmed by you for a minute or until the creature takes any damage. So again, it's not a complete thing, but it is kind of an action economy type thing. You can charm them and they'll stop attacking you and your allies for a little bit because they're charmed by you. You can deal with everyone else. Then when you're ready, kill them all. It's really great. Then the last one they get at 14th level, they get Dark Delirium. This is another thing that I just think it's really, really cool. Basically, what it is you can charm a creature. As an action, choose a creature you can see within 60 feet of you, makes a wisdom save. If it fails, it thinks it's in an illusionary realm that you get to choose what it looks like, and it can't see anyone or hear anyone other than itself and you. Massively useful. Create an illusionary realm where they're just in this beautiful, forest, and have them, convince them through whispers and things, just keep walking towards you. They'll be fine, don't worry. They can't see you, they can just hear you. And they just don't realize that they're walking off a cliff. Or have them just walk into a doorway and stay there and block all of their allies from getting through for a minute. It's a massively useful thing. Now, it does require concentration, but again, super, super useful. It's another thing that short or long rest. So again, showing you just how reliant on short rest and how useful a short rest can be to a Warlock. You get all these different things. And it ends if the creature takes any damage. But unless their allies are willing to attack the creature, you have your own little, and you get, again, you can create whatever you want. It's super interesting and fun. So that's the Archfey. The next one is the Fiend. While the Archfey was very much about control and changing things, the Fiend's about just hurting stuff. Specifically, hurting stuff with fire. If your thought process is, fire is the answer to everything, choose Fiend Pact. Their expanded spell list, Burning Hands, very simple, does a lot of damage for first level. Command, Is another useful one where you give them I believe with command it's a one-word command. So things like disarm, drop, things like that. It has to be one word, but as long as they fail, they're compelled to do that. And it's really interesting. Like you can just go run, and they have to run. It doesn't last very long, but it's a super useful spell. Second is blindness, deafness, and again, Fiend Pact is kind of a combination between domineering, overbearing like command, blindness, deafness, and you kill things with fire. Because the second level spell is Scorching Ray, so you shoot fire rays out of your hand. Very useful. Third level, Fireball and Stinking Cloud. Again, these are super useful damaging spells. That's what the Fiend does. Fourth level, Fire Shield. Fire Shield is super useful because it's not a concentration spell, and it does a lot of damage. This is really, really great for melee warlocks because they get close to someone. Whoever's close to them takes damage. I believe they also take damage if they hit you. So just massively useful, and it doesn't end based on concentration. You just get that, and you can have another concentration spell on it. Super useful. And then the second, fourth level spell, Wall of Fire. I mean, pretty self-explanatory. Fifth level, Flame Strike. Again, super self-explanatory. And then Hallow, which I actually don't know that spell, but I'm going to assume it's kind of a domination control type thing. I'll look it up real quick. H-I... Helps if I actually go to the right page. Crazy, right? It's hallowed ground kind of thing. It's interesting, and it lasts for 24 hours. Again, it prevents celestials and fiends and stuff from going there. It's just a high level area effect spell. It doesn't do direct damage, I don't think, but so that's the fiend spell list. At first level, you get Dark One's Blessing. Anytime you reduce a creature to 0 hit points, a hostile creature to 0 hit points, you get temporary hit points equal to your charisma modifier plus your warlock level. Fiend Pack warlocks, really, really good at just killing things. And every time they kill things, they get temporary hit points. At low levels, it doesn't seem like much. Like you'll start off with generally a +3 charisma modifier. So you only get 4 hit points at level 1. But when you start getting higher up, you're getting 10, 15, 20 hit points every time you knock out a creature. Now, temp hit points don't stack, but they basically get replenished every time you knock out a creature. It's super useful, and again, gives the Fiend Pact a really easy way to kind of wade into battle and be a little bit tankier, because they're always getting these temporary hit points. 6th level, you get Dark One's Own Luck. This basically lets you, whenever you make an ability check or saving throw, you can use this feature to add a D10 to it. Now, you only do it once per short or long rest, but this massive useful. D10 is a big die, and that can change a lot of failures into successes. And this again is that kind of idea of the Fiend being very kind of overbearing and controlling while it kills things. So it doesn't want you to fail saving throws, so you won't. It doesn't want you to fail ability checks, so you won't. And again, feeds into that idea that warlocks really love their short rests. Fiendish Resilience. This is another one that's just super cool and creates a very tanky warlock. You get it 10th level. You choose a damage type when you finish a short or long rest. You gain resistance to that damage type until you choose a different one with this feature. So you can have resistance to any damage type you want. There is no limitation. And it just stays there. The only thing is damage from magical or silvered weapons ignore that resistance. But other than that, if you're fighting a dragon, red dragon, give yourself fire resistance. that means when you save, you take a quarter damage. And because of Darkwind's own luck, there's a good chance you're going to be saving quite a lot. The last one is just massively cool. It's called Hurtle Through Hell. Starting at 14th level, when you hit a creature with an attack, it doesn't say melee attack or anything, just if you hit them with an attack, you can use this feature to instantly transport the target through the lower planes. Creature disappears and hurtles through a nightmare landscape. At the end of your next turn, the target returns to the space it previously occupied, or the nearest unoccupied space. If the target is not a fiend, so literally anyone but devils, it takes 10d10 psychic damage as it reels from the horrifying experience. And this one is a long rest only, because it does 10d10. This is such a cool ability. You got a big baddie that's just giving you trouble and he has a bunch of minions and you just don't want to deal with him for a turn? Zap him with Eldritch Blast, send him to hell. When he comes back at the end of your next turn, he's screwed up. He has just seen something his brain cannot comprehend, and he takes 10d10 psychic damage. It's brilliant. It's the coolest thing ever. It's very much action economy, you know, taking a big baddie out and letting them fly through hell for a little bit. And then when they come back, they take a crap ton of damage, and all your friends are there. It's super cool and fun, and again, the only limiting factor is you can only do it once per long rest. But who the hell cares? You have just taken him out. The other thing that's nice about it, this is not a save feature. They can't save against this. If you hit them, they're going to hell. Massively useful. So again, the Fiend, if you want to be that damaging Warlock, go Fiend. Great Old One. Great Old One is the Cthulhu Pact. That's what it is. They mention Cthulhu in the write-up. It is, excuse me. I'd like you all to know I am not sponsored by the company that makes that juice. I just need something to lubricate my vocal cords. Great Old One is all about crazy shit. If you've ever read Lovecraftian stuff, like that is the definition of the Great Old One. Things that are otherworldly and bizarre that make you question your sanity, like that is what the Great Old One Pact is. It is very much about just freaking people out and going crazy. Their expanded spell list is all about just messing with people and creeping people out. Their first level, Dissonant Whispers, Tasha's Hideous Laughter. Either you can whisper and scare the crap out of them, or you can make them laugh uncontrollably at nothing, which is scary and terrifying when you think about it. Detect Thoughts and Phantasmal Force for second level. Again, Phantasmal Force, you can make them see something that's not there that can hurt them. And Detect Thoughts, you can read their mind. You can probe it for information. Super crazy Lovecraft type stuff. Third level, Clairvoyance and Sending. You can see what they're doing and you can talk to them. Again, all of this is about just doing otherworldly, crazy, sanity-shattering things. Fourth level, Dominate Beast and Avard's Black Tentacles. They kind of are self-explanatory. Take control of a creature. Make it do weird shit. Fifth, Dominate Person and Telekinesis. Again, just weird things happening. Telekinesis is a lot of fun because you can lift people in the air and just slam them to the ground for damage. Or just throw them off a cliff, stuff like that. Just crazy stuff that, again, if you watch, or if you've read Lovecraft or watched anything that's inspired by him, you know, they do deal with stuff like paranormal abilities, like psychic abilities and stuff like that. That's all Lovecraft, and that is really where this shines. At first level, you have what's called Awakened Mind. Start at first level. Your alien knowledge gives you the ability to touch minds of other creatures. You can telepathically speak to any creature you can see within 30 feet. You don't need to share a language with the creature for it to understand your telepathic utterances. But the creature must be able to understand at least one language. You can talk to anyone telepathically by touching their mind. From a mechanic standpoint, this is massively useful for a number of reasons. Because it's telepathic, you can technically use it to implant thoughts that they will automatically understand. You want to start a revolt among your enemies. You want to, make someone paranoid that they're being watched. You want to, excuse me, you want to simulate, a schizophrenic attack or something where they start hearing voices that are whispering crazy things. That's what Awakened Mind does. In addition to allowing yourself to talk to your allies, I've seen Warlocks use Awakened Mind to basically act as relay points for all their allies, so they can have entire conversations in front of their enemies that their enemy can't hear, no matter their perception score. So this is a massively useful thing for so many different ways. It's really just limited by your creativity. Entropic Ward is their 6th level ability. Basically, when a creature makes an attack roll against you, you can use your reaction to impose disadvantage in the roll. Super useful. If the attack misses you, your next attack roll against the creature has advantage if you make it before the end of your next turn. This is another one that's limited by once per short or long rest. But, again, massively useful, especially if you're dealing with one of those creatures that does really bad damage. If you're fighting an enemy rogue, if you impose disadvantage on them, it doesn't matter if they hit you. They can't get sneak attack on a disadvantage roll. That's how sneak attack works. If they miss you, you can turn around and use a super powerful attack roll spell against them and have advantage on it. This is, again, this is designed to just change how things work, frustrate the enemy, make their disadvantage your advantage, because the rules of probability and reality don't work around you because you're friends with Cthulhu. Thought Shield, another just creep, like all the names of this just sound creepy as hell. So at 10th level, your thoughts can't be read by telepathy or other means unless you allow it. You are now immune to detect thoughts. All the stuff that you do to other creatures, they can't do back to you. You also have resistance to psychic damage. So even when crazy stuff happens that most people would go, oh, no, 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 no. You're like, meh, no big deal. And whenever a creature deals psychic damage to you, the creature takes the same amount of damage that you do. So not only that, if someone tries to mess with your mind and it succeeds, you go, bitch, please, zap. So again, very much, because it's psychic damage is generally, you could call it insanity damage. It's damage from things that don't make a lot of sense, that don't have physical form. And old one Warlocks, they don't take kindly to you doing that. Mind flayers are real famous for doing psychic damage, and they do not get along well with great old ones. The final one is Great Thrall. At 14th level, you gain the ability to infect a humanoid's mind with the alien magic of your patron. Now, if that first sentence does not just scream, okay, nope, no, 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 nope, no, 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 nope. I don't know what's wrong with you. You can use your action to touch an incapacitated humanoid. Now, they do have to be incapacitated, which means unconscious or paralyzed, things like that give the incapacitated status. That creature is then charmed by you until a remove curse spell is cast on it. The charm condition is removed from it, or you use this feature again. And you can communicate telepathically with the charmed creature as long as the two of you are on the same plane of existence. This is massively useful. It's not limited by it's not limited by a short or long rest, which is cool. You only have to incapacitate them, which there's a lot of ways to do that. The simplest one is paralysis. There's quite a few different spells that cause paralysis. There are creatures that cause paralysis and things like that. As long as they're paralyzed, there's no save on this. They just become charmed by you. So you gain an ally instantly, and they can't get out of that unless someone casts Remove Curse or the charm gets removed in another way. There's certain creatures that can remove charm effects, like monks can just choose to end a charm effect on them. And there's certain, like vampires can remove charm effects and stuff like that. So, so as long as they're not immune to charm, you can, team up with your cleric, have them hold person, and then touch. You got an ally. They will, this is really great for scouting an area, getting all the information you need. You can even use it as a way to get in places you're not supposed to, because you can just use this to get a really powerful person that works there to just lead you through everywhere. And they will believe 100% that you are their best friend. So again, that's the great old one. Very trippy, but a lot of fun, as you can see. Last thing, and I know this is going a little bit long. Last thing is Eldritch Invocations. I mentioned before, Eldritch Invocations are the other thing that really define how this class works. And this is another thing where, again, with Eldritch Invocations, you get abilities. You get the ability to do things, or they change how spells work. They fundamentally modify a spell so that you can use it the way you want to. Perfect example, Agonizing Blast is the first one. Anytime you use the Eldritch Blast, or you hit with the Eldritch Blast, you can add your Charisma modifier for damage. This kind of turns your Warlock into kind of a ranger or a bow fighter. Because bow fighters and rangers, when they shoot with an arrow, they do damage from the arrow, or they shoot with a bow. They do damage from the arrow plus their dex mod. Well, this lets you use your Eldritch Blast, which the interesting thing about Eldritch Blast is it gets higher powered. Like cantrips level up in 5th edition and get more powerful. Most of them, like Firebolt, instead of doing 1d10 damage when you attack it, at level 5 you do 2d10. At level 11 you do 3d10. At level 17 you do 4d10 with each attack, which means that your cantrips are useful all the way to the end of the game. Warlocks, instead of just doing extra damage, you fire an additional Eldritch Blast at 5th level, at 11th level, at 17th level. So with this, because you're firing an additional blast, that means every time you fire a blast, so at 5th level you fire 2 blasts. If you hit twice, you add your Charisma modifier twice. At 11th level, you do it 3 times. 17th level, you do it 4 times. You basically get the same number of attacks as a ranged fighter. And can add your Charisma modifier. Massively useful. And that's kind of, again, how all these invocations work. Armor of Shadows. You can cast Mage Armor on yourself at will without expending a spell slot or material components. You get free Mage Armor. For a Warlock, again, for a melee Warlock and even a ranged Warlock, this is super useful because it ups your AC and makes you significantly harder to hit. Always, always, always useful. And now you get it for free. Any other spellcaster, that's a first level. That's a first level spell. Excuse me for a second. It is so dry right now in Wisconsin because of snow and ice and everything. All right. So that's Armor of Shadows. Ascendant Step. Now, some of the Eldritch Invocations have certain prereqs. Like Ascendant Step, you have to be 9th level. So it doesn't completely break your Warlock, because some of these are really useful, but you have to be a certain level before you can use them. That's Ascendant Step. You cast Levitate on yourself at will without expending. So now you have a free Levitate spell. Again, incredibly useful. You basically don't take fall damage anymore because you can just levitate yourself before you hit the ground. You can, you know, hover and things like that. Super, super useful. Next one, Beast Speech. You can cast Speak with Animals at will. That's a lot of the Eldritch Invocation is basically just giving you extra spells you can cast at will. Again, the Warlock is limited in their spellcasting ability. So a lot of the utility spells that other spellcasters would have, the Warlock can't really afford to take them because they have such limited spellcasting. They need to make sure every spell they have is massively useful. And a lot of times they tend to take a lot more damage causing spells because a lot of the utility spells, they can just Eldritch Invocation to use it for free. You are limited, I should mention this, you are limited to how many invocations you can know. At second level, when you get them, you only know 2, and then you get another one at 5th, another at 7th, another at 9th, 12th, 15th, 18th, and 18th to last. So by 18th level, you have 8 invocations, which is, again, a lot of things. And they really help you define how you want to play your character. If you want to be a melee type Warlock, take Armor Shadows or a couple other ones that I'll mention in a second here. You want to be a ranged one, take that Agonizing Blast. It's super useful. So that was Beast Speech. Beguiling Influence. You gain proficiency in the Deception and Persuasion skills. They're both charisma-based. Warlock's a charisma caster. Massively useful. This is, again, it's that utility stuff is built into Eldritch Invocations as opposed to wizards that have it built into their spells, or bards, they have it built into their additional proficiencies and expertise. Next one, Bewitching Whispers. This is a 7th level minimum. You can cast Compulsion once using a Warlock spell slot. You can't do so again until you finish a long rest. This is one where it gives you basically an extra spell known that you can use once per day. Again, very useful. You're not sacrificing spell slots, and it's a utility type spell. Book of Ancient Secrets. This basically turns your Book of Shadows into a ritual spell book, which means you can learn more spells like a wizard as long as they're rituals. Rituals have so many different effects and things like that. I'm just checking this really, really quick. So yeah, it's basically you can learn any ritual spell. If the spell has a ritual tag, you can learn it, copy it in your spellbook, and cast it as long as you have your Book of Shadows. The only limitation is if you find a spell scroll or a spellbook that has a ritual in it, the spell's level is equal to or less than half your Warlock level. So it does limit what kind of rituals you can learn depending on your level, but it basically is keeping you in line with other spellcasters. So again, if you want to be that very arcane kind of Warlock, rituals take a minimum of 10 minutes longer than their regular things. So they're not combat things, but this is a high amount of utility. The only limit is you have to have Pact of the Tome. Chains of Carceri, which is a 15th level Pact of the Chain feature. You can cast Hold Monster at will, targeting a celestial, fiend, or elemental without expending spell slot or material components. And you must finish a long rest before you can use this invocation on the same creature again. So again, this gives you access to a spell at will. And Hold Monster is a 4th level spell. So you can now cast a 4th level spell at will. The only limitation is has to be celestial, fiend, or elemental, which is a wide branch of creatures. you have to finish a long rest before you can cast it again on the same creature. So you can just use this spell over and over. You're fighting a thing of elementals. You are set. Devil's Sight is one of the most popular ones. You can see normally in darkness, both magical and non-magical, to a distance of 120 feet. This is the one I've seen most often in multi-classes. I've seen monks do it. I've seen warlocks do it that are melee warlocks. It basically means that the darkness spell normally will blind you even if you can see in darkness. If you have dark vision, you have to have true sight or something like that. This gives you that. You can see in magical darkness. It's massively useful, and there's a lot of different ways to use it. Dreadful Words, 7th level minimum. You can cast Confusion once using a Warlock spell slot, once per long rest. Again, another one that just gives you an extra spell that doesn't count against your spells known. And again, it's a kind of control utility type spell, so you can save your Warlock spells known for the damaging stuff, the really useful stuff. Eldritch Sight, you can detect magic at will. Again, Detect Magic is a massively useful spell, but it's a utility spell. It's a first level spell, and every other caster, they have to weigh, especially at low levels, they have to kind of weigh it versus, okay, do I want to use that spell slot, or do I want to use it for a Cure Wounds to bring an ally up, or a magic missile, or burning hands? This, you don't have to do that. You can have it on all the time if you want. Super use it. Eldritch Spear. It just requires the Eldritch Blast cantrip, which you should have as a Warlock. When you cast Eldritch Blast, its range is 300 feet. You are now a sniper. Your range for the spell is 300 feet. If you have the Agonizing Blast, not only is it 300 feet, but you do extra damage every time you hit with it. If you take the Spell Sniper feat, that doubles the range of any cantrip with an attack roll, which Eldritch Spear. You have a 600-foot range Eldritch Blast. Massively useful. I built a character around that. He's a sorcerer Warlock hybrid. He takes two multi-class. He takes 2 levels of Warlock, so he can get Agonizing Blast and Eldritch Spear. He took the Spell Sniper feat at level 4, and then when he does, because they're cantrips, he will use his sorcery points to quicken the Eldritch Blast, so he can do 2 Eldritch Blasts a turn, which means that at level 5 he can cast 4 he can make 4 attacks per turn. When he gets up to level 17, he can make 8 attacks per turn, just burning 1 sorcery point. So yeah, he's a literal spell slinger, just firing off Eldritch Blast like crazy. He's a super cool character. That's one of the things you can do with a Warlock, is you can create these really interesting, unique characters. Eyes of the Runekeepers, the next one. You can read all writing. Massively useful. If you've ever been wandering around those ruins that everyone's like, well, there's writing on the wall, but none of you speak, this strange version of Celestial. I do, or I can read it at least. Fiendish Vigor. You can cast False Life on yourself at will as a first level spell without expending a spell slot. False Life gives you temp hit points. That basically means you can just continually give yourself temp hit points whenever you want. First level, I think it's only like 4 hit points, so it's not a ton. But again, even 4 hit points, that little buffer is worth it in a lot of cases. Because as long as you have some sort of hit points, you're not unconscious. Even if they're temp, you're not unconscious. It's useful. Gaze of Two Minds. You can use your action to touch a willing humanoid and perceive through its senses until the end of your next turn. As long as the creature is on the same plane of existence as you, you can use your action on subsequent turn to maintain this connection. Basically, you can see through an ally. Or through an enemy if you want. I mean, or no, it's a willing humanoid. This is super, super useful in situations if you're like a human warlock and you can't, excuse me, you can't see in darkness. You use this, touch a friend that can see in darkness, and you're blind and deaf while it's happening, but you can hear and see through them, and you just have them walk with you. You basically, you put their hand on them, you can still feel things, you just can't see or hear. So this is a great way to get around that. Or if you want a second scout, you send an ally forward, you can do that. You can have the warlock basically reporting back to the party as long as they're in the same plane of existence. This is the ultimate walkie-talkie, guys. Life Drinker. It's 12th level, Pact to the Blade. When you hit a creature with your pact weapon, the creature takes extra necrotic damage equal to your charisma modifier. Again, if you're a melee warlock, this is super useful because when you make a melee attack, or theoretically if you do, because you have to have Pact to the Blade if you're using ranged, you're already going to be adding either your strength or dexterity modifier depending on the weapon. With this, you also add charisma. Again, really, really useful, especially if you pair that with Hex. You can do a lot of damage as a warlock. Mask of Many Faces. You can cast disguise self at will. Again, all those really useful utility spells, you get to cast them for free. Master of Myriad Forms is a 15th level one. You can cast Alter Self at will without expending a spell slot. Alter Self does so many useful things. You can breathe underwater. You can grow claws. I mean, it's a massively useful spell. Change your appearance physically, unlike Minor Illusion, where it's illusion. You physically change. It's super, super useful. Minions of Chaos, 9th level. You cast Conjure Elementals once using a Warlock spell slot. You can't do so again until you finish Long Rest. Conjure Elemental, super useful to just get more allies. Again, that action economy, the more people on your side that have actions, the better off you are. This is a great way to do that. And again, doesn't count against your Warlock spell slots, so you have other spells known. So you have other things you can do, you can learn. Mire of the Mind is a 5th level. You can cast Slow once using a Warlock spell slot. Slow is a massively underutilized spell. It makes it so it slows their speed, which makes sense, but it also makes it so they can't take as many actions. It's a very action economy type thing, and it's super, super useful. So having that as, again, just another spell you have access to, it's great. Misty Visions, you can cast Silent Image at will. That's another just illusion type thing, very useful utility spell that you don't want to spend your limited spells known on. One with Shadows is a 5th level. If you are in dim light or darkness, you can use your action to become invisible. Not quite as useful because the invisibility ends if you move or any other way that ends invisibility, but it can be a very useful way to hide. If you can sneak into a room that they're going to have a meeting in, go into a dark corner, go invisible, and you can spy in the meeting by just not moving. So it has its uses. Otherworldly Leap is the 9th level. You can cast Jump on yourself at will. Again, another thing that's very useful utility-wise, and the fact that you can do it at will, whereas anyone else, I believe Jump might be a 2nd level spell, I think. It's a useful thing. This is another one that changes Eldritch Blast. Repelling Blast. When you hit a creature with Eldritch Blast, you can push the creature up to 10 feet away from you in a straight line. Again, Eldritch Blast hits multiple times. If you're fighting in a place that has a hole or a cliff, just move around, Eldritch Blast someone. At 5th level, you can move them 20 feet if you hit them twice. 11th, you can move them 30 feet. At 17th, you can move a creature 40 feet in a straight line. Massively useful. This is the crazy control. And again, if you combine that with like Eldritch Spear, you can move them up to 40 feet from 300 feet away. It's massively useful. Just make sure you don't push them beyond the 300 feet or you can't hit them with the subsequent attacks. It's just massively useful. Next one, Sculptor of Flesh. 7th level. You can cast Polymorph using a Warlock spell slot. And that's another long rest one. Polymorph, again, very useful, but it's a utility spell. Most Warlocks want to focus on damage for their spell slots, so you just take that one. And Polymorph can be used so many ways. It's really useful. Sign of Ill Omen, 5th level. You can cast Bestow Curse using a Warlock spell slot. Bestow Curse is an interesting one because it's a great debuff. But it generally tends to be, if you save, nothing happens and you waste a spell slot. With Warlocks, because you get your spell slots back on a short rest, it's a much more useful utility type spell. I believe it gives disadvantage and a couple other things, so it's useful. But Warlocks can get a little more use out of it than most classes. Thief of 5 Fates. You can cast Bane once using a Warlock spell slot. Bane is super underutilized. In Critical Role, Talison's new character uses it all the time, and people are shocked at the fact that they never used it before. Basically, every attack roll, saving throw, or ability check, the creature has to roll a d4 and subtract it from that. It's a massively useful way to prevent your enemies from getting attacks, from making saves. It's super useful because 4 points can easily mean the difference between a success and a fail. So it's a massively useful thing. Next one is Thirsting Blade. It's 5th level, Pact of the Blade feature, and it just lets you attack with your packed weapon twice, basically keeping you aligned with every other melee class except for fighters, where they get tons of attacks. Every other melee class gets the extra attack feature. That's what Thirsting Blade is. And when you combine that with Life Drinker at 12th level, you do a ton of damage with those 2 swings, especially if you're using like a great sword or a great axe or something like that does a lot of damage. And then you get an extra attack, and then you get extra charisma damage. It's great. Visions of Distant Realms. This is a 15th level. You can cast Arcane Eye at will without expending a spell slot. Arcane Eye is another super useful scouting spell. You create this eye. It can be visible or invisible. You can see through it. You send it out, and you can scout an area from the air, from the ground. If you're not a Pact of the Chain Warlock, this is your ultimate scouting spell. You never will go into a room that you don't know what's going to happen. It's great. Voice of the Chainmaster. This is a Pact of the Chain one. You can communicate telepathically with your familiar and perceive through your familiar senses as long as you are in the same plane of existence. You can also speak through your familiar. Again, Find Familiar lets you do that up to 100 feet, so it's limiting. This means anywhere. You can scout ahead 2 miles if you want using your familiar. And with the Infamiliar, that can turn invisible. Again, this turns into the ultimate scout for you. Invisible, flying creature, it's kind of small. Go anywhere you want. Know exactly what you're getting into. And every so often, scare the shit out of someone by just whispering in their ear. Next one is Whispers of the Grave. This is a 9th level one. You can cast Speak with Dead at will without expending a spell slot. Speak with Dead, another super useful spell, but it's I believe it's level 2, I think, or level 3. It's a higher level spell. It's not a level 1. And again, most other spellcasters have to choose, okay, do I want to waste a spell slot on this, or do I want to keep it for something else? You don't have to do that. You've got Whispers of the Grave. And the final one is Witch's Sight, which is 15th level. You can see the true form of any shape changer or creature concealed by illusion or transmutation magic while the creature is in 30 feet of you and within line of sight. It's basically a form of true sight. This one I would say is the most limited use. Because if you're in a situation like if you're in the Feywild, illusion magic and transmutation, like that's everywhere. If you're just fighting a ton of undead, they don't really use illusion that often. They just swarm and kill you. So that one is very much dependent on the campaign you're running, but again can be very useful. So anyway, I know this video has gone really long, but I wanted to get through that. That is the basics of the Warlock. So if you're thinking about building a Warlock, remember your cantrips are going to be very useful to you. You are going to have, with your Eldritch Invocations, you're going to be able to have a lot of different spells that you cast at will that every other class can't. Wow, it is so dry. It's amazing. I am dying here. Excuse me. Yeah, your cantrips are your friend. Short rests are wonderful for you. They will change your life. And your pact, your patron is going to define how you play your class. So pick the patron that's going to give you the ability to play the class the way you want. So yeah, one day I'm probably going to do a series of videos where I just go through the spell lists of the different classes. Probably just one video per spell list because they're extensive. To kind of show that with magic users, a lot of the defining features of the class are based on the spell list, and it just takes too long to go through all of them in a video where I'm also talking about class features. So, but yeah, look over the spell list. There's a lot of really cool things. Armor of Agathis is super useful because not only does it give you 10 hit points, every time you get hit, they take the full amount of your temp hit points of damage as frost damage. So as a melee or even a ranged one, it's super useful. If someone hits you, they're going to get hurt too. And as long as you still have, like if they do 8 damage, or they attack twice and they do 16 damage and you cast it at 3rd level, which gives you 15 hit points, they're going to take a total of 30 hit points because they hit you twice with before those were gone. So it's a super useful spell. There's a bunch of other really useful ones. Again, I'll make a video about it. But that's the Warlock. Really unique, very different from every other spell casting, and lore-wise, it's super interesting that you have to make deals with this creature that may not have your best interest in mind. So anyway, that's all from me. I'll see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.